Hi, everybody. It's Miriam Siegel from the Center for Mastery and Excellence, or CentrumX for short. I wanted to come on today and talk to you a little bit about when it's good to be out of your mind. When it's good to be out of your mind. Now, for those of you who know me, and maybe you've seen me on the Presence Posse, where we speak about presence and all things presence, really. You may have heard us talk about not being in the mind, not being in thought, not identifying with thought, and that sort of thing. But there are a lot of people who don't really know what we mean by that. And I know it took me a while to figure it out. So I thought I would just share some thoughts on that. And even there are some actually quite well-known coaches, one in particular that I think about, that comes to mind, Christian Mickelsen. He actually says, stay out of the mind, stay in the body. You'll hear him say that quite often. Stay out of the mind, stay in the body. What does that mean? So the idea of out of the mind, when I was a kid, people would say that somebody was out of their mind if they meant they weren't quite right in the head in some way. This is not what we're talking about. Staying out of the mind in this particular instance is talking about not being lost in thought, not identifying with thought, not believing that your thoughts are true or telling you something about what is true and what is real, not being attached to your thoughts. So it's kind of like understanding the difference between a thought and a reality. Believing that your thoughts are telling you something about reality, about what is true, about yourself, or understanding that it's just a thought. And then staying present to whatever is going on with you. So it's becoming aware of your internal dialogue, but also your internal experiences. And this is kind of how I equate Christian Mickelsen's expression of stay out of the mind, stay in the body. Is just become aware and stay aware of what's going on in your body and don't get lost in your thoughts. Don't start believing everything you think. This can be especially important for people who have a lot of fear, who have grudges, who have anxiety or panic attacks, where it's easy to get lost in thought. So something will be frightening you, and it's generally a thought about something that could be catastrophic in the future or connected to something that happened in the past. It can also be things like what you tell yourself about yourself, like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worth it, nobody's going to love me, or even nobody loves me. All of these are thoughts. But for people who believe that their thoughts are telling themselves something about their reality, it can be difficult to understand that they're not. What they're often doing is reflecting something that's happened or something that someone has said to you. But it doesn't have to be who you are, how life is, how the world is. So there are some training programs out there. I did one a while ago. It was the Positive Intelligence Quotient, or PQ. Like we have IQ and EQ, so this is PQ, and it's a program developed by a fellow named Shirzad Shamin. And he had has an interesting way of identifying thoughts. And in a way, it can make it easier. And as an expressive arts psychotherapist, we will often use this kind of thing to bring whatever's going on into your mind out of your mind and into the room. So it becomes very obvious and very easy to see what it is. And then let it go. Because once we reveal something, it's kind of hard to keep it. It's easier to let it go than when we've revealed what it is. So when Shirzad has developed this program, he's developed a system of what he calls saboteurs. And I found this really, really interesting. Saboteurs will be generally thoughts or beliefs or thought patterns that somehow get in the way of you living who you really are and the life that you're meant to live. So examples of saboteurs would be the judge, the victim, the avoider, the controller, that kind of thing. And you notice even by the names of this that they're talking about kinds of thoughts that are kind of getting in the way. Even the word saboteur, that's kind of obvious, right? It's the idea of self-sabotaging thoughts, and which will often lead to self-sabotaging behavior. So his idea, to make this easy, is to identify the kinds of thoughts you have. And he has a test that you can go through to find out what your most common thoughts are. So whether you have a preponderance of judging thoughts or controlling thoughts or avoiding thoughts, this kind of thing. And when you identify the kind of thoughts that you have, then it's easier to not fall for them, is the kind of idea. You don't fall for them and you go, oh, that's the judge. It's not me, it's the judge. It's not me, it's the victim. And it's quite true, it isn't you. It isn't you, because you are pure consciousness, pure being, pure awareness, pure energy, however you want to, whatever words you want to use. The thoughts are not you. They will generally, as said, come from something outside of you, like somebody said something to you when you were younger and you took that on as an identity. And that's what we mean when we talk about identifying with thoughts. It becomes an identity of us. I'm not good enough. That's who I am. Or even, I'm good at this. That's who I am. And then we run the risk of, if we have a thought like, I'm good at this, then we run the risk of, if one day I'm not good at this, or I fail, then I lose face, to put it that way. We're always trying to save face and be the good at. So identifying with thoughts can appear to be a kind of identity about who you are. But it's not who you are. It's a belief you have about yourself, or a belief you want to have about yourself, or even a belief you don't want to have about yourself. And that's where these saboteurs come in. Being attached to a thought, that's in the way that the thought is so important to you that you are not willing to identify it as a thought or let it go. And it can even seem, when somebody reveals the thought as just being a thought, or is in disagreement with your thought because they have another thought, it can feel kind of life-threatening if you're attached to the thought, especially if some thought, some belief, which is a thought, has carried you through difficult situations. Then your attachment to that thought might be quite cemented in. So the idea of letting that thought go can feel rather threatening. It can feel really scary. Now, again, those are also thoughts. If you're afraid of letting go of a thought, what's the thought about the thought? Because you can let go of fear in the same way you can let go of a thought. Identifying the fear in the same way that you identify the thought can help you just release it. So if something feels scary and you identify it as, oh, it's a feeling, just like, oh, it's a thought, the feeling is not necessarily telling you anything about your present situation. Just because you feel fear doesn't mean you're in danger. If you identify with that fear or attach to that fear and believe that your fear is telling you something about your circumstances, then you may react in a certain way. And when we talk about fight, freeze, flight, for example, you may verbally attack someone because you feel frightened and you believe that the other person is doing something that causes danger, and then you attack. But if you recognize that, wait a minute, it's just energy, it's just a feeling. When I look around, I see I'm not in danger. I don't feel really any danger. I'm actually, as for example, I could be sitting here talking to you live like this and think all kinds of thoughts about myself, like I'm not good enough, maybe I'm not organized enough, maybe I'm talking too long, or I'm talking too slowly, or you're all going to think this is really boring, or none of this information is true. There's so many thoughts I could come up with if I really want to make things difficult for myself. And oh, people are not going to like me, so they're not going to want to watch my stuff, and then they're not going to want to work with me, and then I'm going to go hungry, and I'm going to lose all my friends, and I'm going to lose my clients, and I'm going to ruin my reputation. You get how this is going, right? It's amazing how creative we can be with our thoughts. What I'm actually doing is scaring the living daylights out of myself if I were to feel afraid of that. Of course, for me, it's just a bunch of words. But if I believe them and I feel the fear, I run the risk of believing that my fear is telling me that I'm in danger and I need to protect myself. So I need to run away. I need to end relationships. I need to say nasty things or do something behind somebody's back or carry some resentment and want to avenge myself or something. I mean, there are a whole bunch of scenarios just because of the feeling of fear. But it can be identified in the same way as thoughts. If you find it useful to start noticing your thoughts and kind of attach what I would call a personality or even identity to them, like that is the victim thought or that is the judge thought, as Shirzad Shamin has suggested. If you find that helpful, by all means, do that. It's like, oh, it's just my victim, or there's my victim. What is happening now that that's showing up? Because it can be really interesting to notice thought, to notice feeling, and find out what kind of information it's giving you. It's like, oh, this reminds me of a past experience when I tanked. And so I'm feeling anxious because I'm telling myself I'm going to tank again. And they all laughed at me that time. So they're all going to laugh at me this time. And then it's a reflection of my worth. I'm going to feel worthless or something like that. Again, actually, this is interesting because memories are also thoughts. Now, I'm not saying things didn't happen. That's not what I mean. Things did happen. We'll put it that way. You have the experiences you've had, but the memories of them are not the experiences themselves. They happened in the past. They're already gone. They're already done. So what you're remembering is a thought about an experience that you've had in the past. It's not happening now. The thought is happening, but not the experience, not the memory. The memory is a thought. The experience already happened. So sometimes when we go into ruminations and we think about again and again, and we imagine different endings to these scenarios where we feel better, we're actually just identifying with an experience from before, with the memory of an experience from before, which is a thought. And we can release that thought and in that way release any reaction to it. So the idea of being out of the mind or out of your mind in this context is very positive because it frees you up to be who you are. And when you are who you are, you can be in life with much more ease, much more effortless. The creativity that you use to protect yourself, to answer back to thoughts, to try to handle, manage thoughts and feelings, you don't need in that way. And you don't need the energy that is attached to it either, binding it up, right? You don't need to stress yourself because you recognize that they're just thoughts. They're not really dangerous. It just feels, it can feel dangerous, it can feel sad, it can feel angry, but it's thoughts. And then the flow comes, the ease comes, the creativity comes in a different way, not to protect you, but to bring you aliveness, vitality, joy, freedom, flow, for example. And from your presence, you live in a different way. And you're not controlled by your thoughts and your fears and your emotions. You can let them go. You don't need to control them because you've revealed what they really are. Doesn't that sound great? I love that. I love it because it's so empowering. When I know that I have that choice. And I mean, yeah, like anything else, if it's not really easy, it can be trained. Like I didn't always, and I still don't always recognize a thought, especially if I was attached to it and I'm thinking it and I'm thinking it, and all of a sudden I'll go, wait a minute, that's a thought. For me, I keep it simple. I just call it a thought. As I say, it doesn't matter whether you identify it as a judgment or a belief or a victim thought or a controlling thought. If that helps you, try that. If you're a little bit simpler, I like to simplify, so it's a thought. And if that helps you, that's great because it's empowering. When I know I can decide, when I know I'm the one that can reveal all of this, then I can also be the one to let it go and then come back to presence and who I really am and be who I really am in the world. Because even other people's thoughts, now again, my thoughts about what other people are thinking about me, that's not necessarily what they actually are thinking about me. Even so, I have the choice to believe those thoughts like, oh, they don't like it, or oh, they don't like me, or oh, they're going to laugh at me. All of these thoughts that I think they're thinking about me. And I laugh because I just know I've done so much of that before. I can let those thoughts go because there's no way I can really know what they're thinking. And even if they are thinking that, it doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with their thinking. And maybe they need to get in touch with their thoughts and let their thoughts go so that they can live with more ease and live more effortlessly and in flow and in awareness, in being in the world. So I invite you to play around with this. And having I mentioned before, this can be trained. And if you would like help with that, you're more than welcome to contact me and we can set up a session for you and see what you need. But give it a go. Just start by noticing when you're in your mind and then see what it's like to even invite the possibility that you can be out of your mind in a good way. It's like, do I need to believe that thought? Is that thought serving me in any positive way? Is it useful? Is it helpful? Or is it in some way detrimental to my living with aliveness and vitality and freedom and ease and joy and all of those things? So I will wish you a good Friday. And again, if you'd like some help, you are welcome to contact me. And we'll have a chat and see if there's anything, see if we can identify some things, some thoughts, and help you get on your way.